Right. Welcome to Intellicide.
The show that wonders what happened to intelligence in America.
Yep. And this is the post-election edition.
Yes. Post-election. Is it though? Is it?
Well, we're still looking at results. And I don't want to sound too cocky, but it looks like VP Biden is going to win.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it looks that way right now. It wasn't the landslide that, I think we talked about before that, would have been necessary to make it totally clear.
Right.
It's unfortunately very close, which is really, that's probably the disheartening thing is that after all this, after 4 years, that many people still supported him.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, it's but it looks like Biden's in the lead. It's an interesting thing actually. I don't know the AP's website. Have you seen this? Let me allow me to show this.
Okay.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
I can. Yeah, I've used that election tracker myself.
Yeah. So this is the. So actually, I think I need to refresh this because. Oh no, it's still giving me. Oh, reset map. There we go. So this is as it stands right now. Biden's right here. And the weird thing is, it's like if he wins any of these states, Biden wins.
Mm-hmm.
But Trump needs almost all of these states in order to win.
Right.
He would have to win all of them. And so right now, I guess
he's
what's
currently
really
down in Georgia.
What's that?
He's currently down in Georgia.
Trump is?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's currently down.
And, according to Steve Karnacki, the guy from MSNBC, the election wonk, what they're down to in Georgia is counting the provisional ballots.
Right.
So, I mean, Biden's leading and those provisional ballots typically lean Democratic. So, we'll have to see what happens.
Right.
I mean, any one of those states, though, goes Biden's way and they declare it, he's pretty much won it at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. But the whole thing is, like we've said before on the show, what I totally expect to have happen is that Trump's going to use he's going to deny it. He's going to fight it all the way to the end.
Right.
And it will be an interesting test of our system to see how successful he is.
Yeah, my thing, we can't be surprised by his behavior, especially over the last 4 years. He doesn't seem like he could be a gracious loser. Right. Losing is anathema to him. He reviles it, and I'm not surprised. I just don't want him to throw a monkey wrench, on his way out the door. Try to sabotage the Biden presidency, which,
I fully expect.
Mitch McConnell was already
going to do that.
Right. Mitch McConnell was already, started lining up to oppose him and, his cabinet positions. And this is the thing. What a lot of people don't realize, that while you have the presidency, and that's always looked at as a big thing, it's Congress, the Senate and the House that do a lot of things in Washington. And for him to they've put in place some very radical judges. I mean, people that didn't have any experience on the bench other than writing papers, and their opinions were considered very radical. Even for the right, they were very radical, and they put them in place, and they could be in place for 30, 40 years, some of these judges. And then for him to say that, we're not going to confirm any radical left judges that Biden could, put in place or nominate. and that's where I think people fail to realize the impact of these elections. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was how these elections of senators such as Tom
Hmm.
Tillis in North Carolina. So this guy had an affair, and not to say that, hey, you have to base all of this on these moral questions, your vote or
Hmm.
whatever. But in the past, we've seen where individuals that have done things like that, they've been skewered by the right, and the consistency of that message where they go from a party that, oh, we believe in these family values,
Oh,
etc., and then you transform into this party where, oh well, I didn't need him to be a boy scout, I'm not electing him to do that, he's getting what I want done
right,
accomplished.
right.
that that's
Well,
that's
which is it? Are you the party of family values, or are you the people who don't need him to be a Boy Scout?
Right. And that's where people need to understand that there's a consequence to these men and women that are in the House and the Senate. So I was surprised that the Democratic challenger didn't have enough votes backing him
Hmm.
in that state. I was really shocked about Susan Collins.
Yeah.
Uh, that one really surprised me. But then the two I was happy that the two elections in Georgia, both of those are going to runoffs. It
Right.
appears.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was more of a repudiation of President Trump than the Republican Party, and I think that people they need to keep their eyes open,
Hmm.
especially for 2022 and 2024, especially when it comes into people like this. What's his name? Madison Cawthorn in North Carolina. He's currently the youngest. He's going to be the youngest representative elected. And some of his language, that he's used and his demeanor,
Hmm.
right? He's a Trump style candidate
Mm.
and elected official, and I think that they have thoroughly embraced
Yeah.
that attitude. Trumpism is not dead by any means. Is
Right.
I think it's here to
Right.
stay.
Well,
And
it's
if
an
we think it,
expression of partisanship and cult of personality
yeah,
around
right.
partisan. Actually, so it's interesting. So uh, to your point, and also to tie it kind of back to what I was saying before, a lot of people are trying to understand, how people can support someone like that,
Hmm.
despite the last 4 years, right?
Right.
And there's a, a theory, a political theory, by a philosopher, the aestheticization of politics.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll put a link in the video. But the whole idea of the theory, and this goes back to he studied like the Italian history of fascism, and the whole thing, the aestheticization of politics, he says, is a key component of fascism, because what it is people see politics as a spectacle rather than as a system or expression of their rights,
Hmm.
right? They don't connect it to their rights and their everyday life. They see it as this spectacle and this entertainment that they can then disconnect from regular life and
Hmm.
pick their team and support them wholeheartedly. It's literally like people talk about how they treat politics like sports, right? And
Hmm.
this is all part of that. Um, People are able, because they are able to see the theory goes deeper into it because it's interesting, but it has to do with how they use images to represent politics for them, and they
Hmm.
use these mythologies like Trump and patriotism and freedom, as they put
Right.
it, and they build up a mythology that they adhere to, that is a spectacle that's separate from life. And it's hard to describe other than think of professional wrestling.
Hmm.
It's like people who are diehard professional wrestling fans. It doesn't matter to them whether it's real.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the spectacle of it all that they love, and that's kind of what the aestheticization is, because that's an aesthetic, right? And that's
Right.
what they're doing to politics
Hmm.
and it's something that's happened before. It happened in Italy. It's happening here right now,
Right.
and that's really the problem. Is that people are you know, I've talked about it before as being a cult.
Hmm.
You know, there's a cult of personality that's formed around Trump. But at the same time, I've also said for years the Republican Party is a cult in search of a leader,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and they will go back to being that when Trump is out of power.
Well, yeah, and that's what I fear is that the next person, because I think one of the things about President Trump that was very polarizing was his behavior. Now
Hmm.
imagine someone who can drive that intensity and that feeling of disenfranchisement and being left behind, all of that on the right, and then he has the personality where he's not that abrasive, but
Right.
he can get his agenda done. Um, that person's gonna, it's gonna be very interesting. Is one of the kindest words I can do, but I can
Yeah.
see how it can be also very dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I really think
Well,
we
it
need to understand the precipice that we are on right now.
yeah. To your point about morals, though, and character, that, you know, people who say, you know, I don't want a Boy Scout, right? They're not electing a Boy Scout. The problem with that is, and really the circular problem of Machiavellian ethics like that is the snake eating its tail, is that if
Mhm.
you're putting someone you can't trust into power because you think they're going to represent you, the very fact you can't trust them and that they are not trustworthy means that they will eventually betray you.
Right,
And
right.
it's, I don't know, it's one of those things where the the moral character, so what we talked about before, right, the cult of personality,
Mhm.
the aestheticization of politics, it's not on one side, right? It happens to both sides.
Right.
The difference, so like Obama had a cult of personality around him to a point,
Mhm.
right? He had the really diehard fans of him. There was more of that to him. The difference was he didn't. I don't know if he didn't know how to do it, but he never took advantage of it. And the
Mhm.
difference is when you get someone who's in that position who has the charisma and they know what they're doing and how to manipulate people.
Right.
And that's the difference is you get someone who's a narcissist or who's used to manipulating people into that position, and suddenly you get someone like Trump who
Mhm.
will take that cult of personality and use it and vilify the other side and build up
Right.
his base, and he's basically done all those things that, and that's the difference, right, is that character, right? Obama had the platform and the
Mhm.
charisma, but he chose not to use it in that way, and that's where
Right.
the character makes a difference,
Right.
right?
Well, right. I find it hard to understand why individuals say that they want someone representing them like that. But when if it came down to their personal interactions with people,
Hmm.
they wouldn't want someone treating them the way that President Trump treated them.
Right, right, and
That
that's
like that
right.
that doesn't, I don't understand that. If you accept that behavior in your interactions and you're fine with someone calling you names, talking
Right.
about your loved ones, etc., okay, that's fine. But that's not the majority of people. When
Hmm.
someone talks to them like that, they get their backs up, they get
Hmm.
defensive, and
Hmm.
they get just as combative as the person that is doing that to them.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. Like, you can't convince me that people, like, they're lying to themselves. If they say that's what they want, then you need to want that in your personal interactions. You can't just say, "Oh, well, he's dealing with somebody else, is fine,"
Right,
until it comes to me.
right. He's it's you know there's I can't remember his name right now. There's a political theorist out there who talked about how people's identity with politics, like whether you're liberal or conservative,
Mm-hmm.
has to do with, because people view politics largely as the same way they view family.
Mm-hmm.
So people talk about like Uncle Sam, and the government as like, Big Brother or something. There's always like the relation between people and government is often compared to the relation between family. And that he has this whole theory about how conservatives tend to like a strict authoritarian, a strict male, like a strict father figure in their politics, which goes along with the idea that it just all depends on how you do government, right? I think we talked about this before, where if and this is largely the problem in America right now, right? The framers created a system that they wanted people to participate in, that you need to be an informed citizen to partake in. The problem is that if people don't partake in it, and this is true pretty much everywhere of any democracy, if you don't partake in the system, it's going to be used against you, right? Like people will pick up the levers of power and use them. And if you aren't willing to get in there and participate, then that leads to a feeling of the government being an other. The government is someone else, that the government is something that's used against people, right? And that's the whole thing that's happening right now. They see government as a weapon to be used against other people.
Right.
And so they don't like the relationship to the government to them. When you talk about like, they don't want someone to talk to them that way, but that's not how they see government. They want someone to go talk to the people they don't like in that way, because they see government as a weapon to be used against people. So they have certain people they don't like, and they want the government to go mistreat those people. Go give them what for, I mean, go give them hell. That's what they see. So when that whole connection of like, well, you wouldn't want government treating you this way, they don't see government as something that they interact with. They see it as something apart and other that they're too good for, or something like that, which that's how you get fascism. Which is a problem, because there is people who have that's the problem with people who want a strong father figure style of government, is they lean towards authoritarianism.
Right.
That's, they are comfortable if they feel that a leader is not hostile to them, right? If they feel like they're part of the in-group in a society, then they're okay with that leader. Especially if they're hostile to another group and that leader shares their hostility.
Well, I mean, what's the one quote that they talk about? First, they came for this group of people.
Oh yeah.
And then they came for that group of people.
Father Niedermeyer from World War II.
And right. I mean, as long as it's not me, but eventually they will get to you, and that's the problem.
When you see that kind of system that just goes after people like that,
right?
If that's your idea of government, and that's kind of the thing, right? Is that the founding fathers came out of the school of enlightenment, right? Like the time that they were creating this government, they were coming out of a long period of European history where government was kings and queens who used power against anyone they didn't like. And that was the system for hundreds, thousands of years. So they were trying to create something new. And that's the problem, is that, people tend to fall into old patterns, like literally thousands-year-old patterns, in their thinking of
the problem that I, we're all Americans, and I think we forget that. I was reading this morning, what's his name? Scott Walden, an Alabama police captain. Well, former Alabama police captain now, because he resigned. But he puts up a Facebook post saying that they need to line up all these Biden voters and shoot them in the skull because they committed treason. As far as I know, VP Biden is an American citizen, has met the requirements of being able to run and be elected as president.
Right.
How is that traitorous? I understand you don't agree with his political positions, but that's not being a traitor. That's not treasonous. But we've built up so much vitriol and partisanship where someone feels someone who is a police captain who's supposed to be serving and protecting the populace, no matter
Right.
what their beliefs are or
Right.
whatever,
Hmm.
and he feels comfortable enough to post that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it doesn't. So it's not just him, right? Like he's expressing a thought that he's not alone when people say,
Right.
"Oh,
Oh
he's
yeah.
a lone wolf." No,
By
no,
no
no.
means.
Steve Bannon, um, just on his radio show, he got banned from Twitter, and I think he got banned from YouTube because he was calling for like Dr. Fauci and somebody else to be beheaded
Yes.
because
Yes.
they betrayed Trump. And
Yeah.
that's the whole, like these
Yeah.
people have gone full fascist. They've
Yeah.
totally accepted Trump. They would, so there is a certain element of people in America that we need to come to grips with this. If Trump were to try to seize power and
Oh, they
just
be
do
fine.
with,
Yeah.
there are a certain number of people who would support him.
Yes. Exactly. And that's what these individuals who say they love America,
Hmm.
they love the Constitution, they,
Right.
they love this flag. What you need
Right.
to understand is that is totally against all of those foundational things that you
Hmm.
say you love.
Right.
And,
Well,
but
and the thing though that I like to that you touched on though with that sheriff
mhm,
is the intersection between the Venn diagram of those two groups, right? The police and the
mhm,
number of people, because that was the whole thing. The one union that supported Trump was the police union,
mhm,
right? There is an intersection between police membership and Trump's followers.
right,
And that needs to be considered because if in that case Trump did try to take power,
right.
and I
He'd
say
have to,
there's a certain number of people, there are a certain number of people within the power structure, within the
right,
police, with
right,
weapons and that who would support him.
right.
And that's where I say, like, I guess what I'm talking to would be like, this would be one of those things where if you are a policeman whose loyalty is not to, who's not a member of that, you're going to have a serious choice to make.
Right, right,
Because, like, if your brothers suddenly decide to back that,
right.
what are you going to do?
Exactly. Right. But I mean, again, what we're talking about is the end of America.
Hmm.
What you want is not America then,
Right.
because we are supposed to have the freedom to express. We are supposed to have the
Hmm.
freedom to choose the majority, you know, in these individual states to choose who they want to back for president. You're going against all of that. And
Right.
what you want is not America. What you want is your own country with your own set of rules, with people that think like you, act like you, vote like you, etc.
Well, and this is
So,
why these people fly the Confederate flag too, right?
right,
They think it's okay to fly the Confederate flag, the flag of enemies of America,
traitors.
because in their hearts, they don't really love what America is.
Right,
They
right.
love what they think America should be.
Well, it's heritage, right? That's the typical refrain. It's heritage.
Right,
I don't
right.
I don't support what the Confederacy was about. It's about my Southern heritage.
Yeah, that's nonsense because you don't see, Germans flying the Nazi flag, even though that's their heritage. You
Listen,
choose what heritage you honor. And
right,
that's the whole thing is by
the
choosing that
whole
part of your heritage to honor, that's a statement in itself.
exactly right, exactly. So
So it's,
yeah, I just it really worries me the amount of people. I told you yesterday, I'm going down Hall Road, and there are a bunch of Trump. I mean, it was a good 30 to 40 people out there,
yeah.
Trump
Hmm.
supporters.
Yes.
Flying a flag, people, cars, honking their horns in support
Yep.
for them and everything. And like,
Yeah.
really, people,
Yeah.
and
Well, it's so, and this is what, we're going to need to, this is, it's a challenging thing, right? Because we're going to have to accept these people aren't going away. This is the
yeah,
challenge
right.
that, that many people still support him despite all this, and that they're following him so religiously, and they're still out there. He'll tweet anything. Like you saw his speech Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
mean, that was, I mean, those are the ravings of a madman.
Right. Right.
I mean, it was like it was crazy, but his followers take that as gospel, and
Yeah.
whatever crazy conspiracy theory he says, which the logic of it's pretty funny actually, because somebody pointed out they're claiming fraud right all over the
Mhm.
place, except president and all the down ballot races are all done on the same ballot.
Right. Right.
So they're accepting all those other races, the results
Right.
of all the congressional and Senate races.
Right.
But so the problem is that they can't have it both ways. If they're claiming all those ballots were fraud, then all of those elections were fraud.
Right. Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
basically, there's no leg to stand on. Once this gets before a judge, who their only hope would be that the judge themselves is part of that
Conspiracy.
cult.
Well, yeah.
You know, there really
Well,
there's a lack of a better word for it. You know, that's the problem with it. I can't think of any other word that's more appropriate than cult.
no, you're absolutely right. I had a discussion with one of our former coworkers on Facebook, and they're talking about the shenanigans they call it going down at the
Mm-hmm.
TCF Center,
Right.
and so uh, one lady, her anecdotal um, evidence, that someone who had been trained as a challenger told her that there were no Republican challengers in the building,
Mm-hmm.
and they kicked them. They wouldn't let them in. They kicked those Republican challengers out. And only Biden,
Right.
challengers or supporters were down there.
Right.
And then I forget the individual's name. She said that this one former state senator was going to post information on his website, evidence that
Uh-huh.
supported this claim. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
if he has evidence, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, the correct place is not to put it on his webpage for views.
Mm-hmm.
It's to take that to the authorities
Right.
and report a crime. It would be a
Right.
crime.
Right.
And again, they don't look at it like that. They don't look at it that someone could be objective enough to say, okay, right, I want VP Biden to win, but
Mm-hmm.
if there was a crime committed, let's report it. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get this, done the right way.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, oh yeah, he said it, so it must be true. And she had the nerve to tell me, stop watching the mainstream media. Well, so what should I be watching? This flammery from this individual that's posting on his webpage.
Yeah, they will literally take the, so like the last episode we talked about a coworker of ours who took literally just a copy and paste of a bunch of claims with no evidence, nothing to support it, but it agreed with his preconceived notions. So he felt free to share that like it was gospel truth. And he's
Right.
acting like, well, can you counter the facts that I posted? It's like, you didn't post any facts. You
Right.
posted a bunch of nonsense.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if you can't back it up with any evidence, it's
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the whole thing, right? Is that if you believe in the aestheticization of politics, if politics to you is nothing more than spectacle, and like it's really nothing more than, a competition of imagery and ideas, not connected to real life policies and results in 250,000 deaths,
All right.
that's the whole thing. To them, they don't. It doesn't matter if it's real. It just, if it looks good, they run with it. Like that's why they're all out there making these. There's a big industry like for Trump supporting memes and videos and stuff where they show like Trump as Rocky or whoever.
Right.
That thing that we were talking about earlier. There's a video, a few videos going around of the Avengers Endgame scene.
Right.
Right now with the results of the election. Which that kind of thing, it's not, I mean, it's not uncommon on the left, but like they have a ton of those things on the right, like just
Yeah.
churning out memes
Oh
and
yeah.
videos like that.
Right.
I know because I see people posting them all the time.
Well, yeah, you
Um,
can go to Reddit and be
and fine.
inundated. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing is that it's going to be an interesting few months, right?
Yeah.
Because even if Biden mathematically wins the election and all that,
Mm-hmm.
there is a slim but real chance that, come January 20th, he might not occupy the White House.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Like
mean,
you said, we're talking about the end of America. And the
yeah,
problem is,
exactly.
here's the thing, people, it's real,
Right.
and that's what, that's the problem with the aestheticization of politics, right? Is that people they see it as this other thing that's not connected, but it's,
All right. Well, so if America ends and the fascists take over, are you moving?
me?
Yeah.
Where? We can't go anywhere. Borders are closed. I mean, literally, like the only places we could go right now, if we really wanted to, were like what, the Dominican Republic, maybe.
Listen, I I'm sorry if people can travel over here illegally. I'm sure I can get somewhere illegally.
Oh, right, yeah, yeah. Well, there's actually there, yeah. I mean, there are people who are talking about there's a whole thing on TikTok about like places on the Canadian border that you could just walk
Oh
across.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's dude, it's wide open. Plenty of places.
Right,
And outside now, you're right. It'd be very difficult to do it, in the time of year that we are. But
right. Well, but I
come
mean, this is the
May,
thing.
June.
This is the crazy thing we're talking about. Do you remember in 2016 where people were saying like, "What's the worst that can happen? Trump gets
Yeah,
elected." Here
yeah,
we are in 2020, 250,000 Americans dead,
yeah,
uncontrolled pandemic, and we're talking about the very real possibility of the peaceful transfer of power in America not happening.
yeah.
You know, that's what can happen.
Exactly. Right. What do you have to lose? Remember that?
Yeah,
What do you have to lose? America.
right.
Yeah, so I mean, right. I don't know if it can get worse than that, y'all. I mean, next on the list is maybe your life, but right, this country that you profess to love, them documents that you profess to love, that's all in the trash after that. Because I don't see how you go back. You can't say that you love this country
Hmm.
if you're willing to just throw it all away just because you get the person that you like the most in
Right.
power. I mean, trust me, I
You,
remember 2000 like it was yesterday, bro. I went to bed.
hmm.
Al Gore was going to be the president.
Right.
I woke up and it's George Bush.
Right.
So I lived through that. Yes, I didn't like it. Okay, he was the president for 8 years. Same thing.
Well, and here's like I mentioned before, I'm going to keep bringing this up to people because we're looking at this happening again, right? They're very open about the idea that they want this election to go before the Supreme Court.
Right.
And I'll
Yeah.
reiterate, deciding federal elections is not a power enumerated to the Supreme Court in the Constitution.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
a power they've taken upon themselves over
Right.
time.
And
So
the
all these people who
precedence is
claim to
there.
be an originalist who are
Yep.
supporting this,
Right.
are
Well,
just
I
full.
support it if it backs what the outcome that I want.
Mhm.
That's where I support it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've told some individuals before. I mean, I had a very Schadenfreude. I think that's the correct word.
Yeah.
Like I wanted President Trump to get reelected, just so I can, like, hey, if he could do this, what he did in 4 years, imagine the chaos that he could sow in 8. I
Yeah.
mean, right. And again, these supporters, these followers, cult members, however you want to,
Hmm.
classify them, if they're like that, I mean, and we've like, been brewed and constructed over 4 years, 8 years. Yeah, I mean, we'd be so close to Nazi Germany, it'd be
That's
ridiculous.
how the Third Reich formed.
Yeah,
It's literally the same thing. He took a damaged country with people whose self esteem had been hurt, and he built them up with a mythology and imagery. And he asceticized politics in Germany with this idea of an Ubermensch and their greatness and the Third Reich and all that stuff. It's the same thing that's kind of being used now with people talking about Trump's America and how it's the greatest America that there's ever been and blah, blah, blah. It's the same kind. Well, actually, so the other point that's interesting that I heard recently that someone pointed out, um, speaking of ties to Nazi Germany,
mm-hmm.
um, you've heard of QAnon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Um, it was kind of a look at like QAnon and the things that the conspiracy theories QAnon says, the idea that Democrats and liberals are the head of this huge like child kidnapping ring, like child
right.
trafficking, and that they actually eat children
Hmm.
and drink their blood. That's
Right.
actually something that QAnons believe, that there's a
Right.
pedophile ring, that cannibals, and that they eat and drink human blood and all that. Well, there was, back in Nazi Germany, there was the things Hitler was saying about the Jews, right? The mythology that he built up about the Jews was partially based on a book that came out called something the Elders of Zion.
Hmm.
And it was basically a book that talked about how the Jews did all of this. They
Right.
kidnapped babies and ate them and drank their blood, and there was some kind of blood rite that they accused the Jews of practicing. It's the same theories,
Right.
but now they've just changed it from being the Jews to being any liberal
Democrats. Right.
or Democrat, and it's,
Right.
but it's the same kind of thing, right? It's they're literally recycling the old Nazi accusations against Jews.
Right. Yeah, but people that don't know their history won't realize that, and
Right.
that's the shame
Protocols
of
of
it.
the Elder of Zion. That was it. Sorry.
Wow. Yeah, I do. I think that we're entering a very dangerous phase that we've never seen before in America, and this current president has, and we can trace this back to Pat Buchanan with the labeling the media as untrustworthy. But now that right, like
Yeah.
you said, that's been widened to include government,
Hmm.
federal government. That's
Right.
been, now, like you said, it's Democrats or liberals.
The deep
Uh,
state,
yeah,
which means
right.
they can, if they've got the deep state, which means they can use it to include, it automatically includes any liberal or Democrat, but then
Yeah.
they can throw in any Republican that they don't like.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah. The
Republican who suddenly
rhino.
disagrees with them, oh well, oh, you're the deep state. It's an easy
Yeah. Yeah.
categorization for them to suddenly discredit anybody who disagrees with them.
Yeah. And it's funny that someone has said that about a lot of Republicans that they were rhinos. And I'm thinking that President Trump is a rhino. I, you
He
know,
was a Democrat not up until a few years before he ran.
Well, not only that, like okay, we talked about this. So very shortly, the deficit is going to become a problem.
Oh, right, yeah.
I
They're going
like
to suddenly
we
remember
haven't
this
thought
national
about
debt.
that in the last 4 years, but now the deficit is going to become a problem.
Right.
And then they're going to say, "Oh, it's Social Security." Well, as far as I know, Social Security, that's a special tax or
Hmm.
whatever. They
That funds itself.
right. And so like it's not contributing to this problem that we have. You know
Right.
what? Pay back the money that you paid, that you borrowed from Social Security. Maybe
Right.
we should do that.
Right.
Maybe we should lower, we got all these NATO countries, supposedly contributing to NATO now.
Hmm.
Maybe we should lower our defense spending or whatever.
Right.
I just don't
Well,
get it.
so, and that's going to be one of the primary policy fights, right? Because
Mhm.
it's the elephant in the room is the spending, right?
Right.
70% of federal discretionary spending goes towards the military in one form or another,
Right.
either directly to the military or to the care of veterans in the VA.
Hmm.
70% of the
Right.
budget that the Congress gets to choose what to do with, they
Right.
have to spend on the military.
Right.
That's a problem, and we need to do something about that. But if you have that worldview of needing a strict parent, a strict father, the idea of when they say make America great, their idea of America being great is America being some strict father over the world with
Hmm.
a strong military who gets to tell everybody else what to do.
Right.
That's when they think America was great. That's when they look back in American greatness, they don't see the prosperity of the middle class. They don't
Ah.
see, people being able to retire with dignity. They see America being able to bully the rest of the world with nuclear weapons over the
Well,
latter half of the 20th century.
so
That's what they think of.
right. So the breaking news, they declared Joe Biden the winner of the election.
Who did?
Well, I see the Houston Chronicle, I see U.S. News and World Reports, the Financial Times, USA Today.
Oh, NBC. Yeah, okay. To win White House. So this is going to be the interesting part, right? Now they're going to try to contest it. The
Right.
interesting thing, like you talked about 2000,
Hmm.
um, in 2000, it all came down to one state. so he could contest it in one state, file a lawsuit, get that lawsuit before the Supreme Court. Well, now, like I said, if you're looking at that map, Biden only needed to win any one of those states that were
Right.
remaining, and he wins, which means Trump has to contest every state Biden wins in, which means he has to get multiple lawsuits before the Supreme Court and have the Supreme Court reverse all of them for him.
Right.
In order for him to win. That's his path now.
Oh, yeah, I mean, everybody was waiting.
He's going to do that. He will spend the next 3 months or 2 months.
I mean, you already have Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz already, you know, supporting, you know, him doing this legal fight.
Right.
I'm telling you, man, I thought November 3rd was going to be, you know, like some kind of book closure or some kind of closure on this, but it's not. I mean, we're just getting started.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. You're right. Yeah, strap in. It's going to be fun. Yay.
I know. I mean, listen, 2020 can't end soon enough, man. I like, listen, let's get to January 20th or whatever the inauguration date's going to be. Let's get to that. And you know, because I'm ready. 2020 it's been terrible for me. I don't know about the rest of America, but for me, it's been a bad year.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think that's a pretty universal feeling. Yeah, I would. So, there was something that I wrote this morning, actually, that I posted that I just kind of want to reiterate that. So everybody's like running around like my social media feed. I don't know about you. My social media feed is full of people right now who are full of angst and worry about a lot of the things we just talked about. Right. Up until probably a few minutes ago, they're all worried about, you know, the rest of the counts. But so I'm not sure. What can I ask? What's your favorite movie?
I'm gonna say Magnificent Seven.
The original?
Yeah, the original.
Wow. Okay, that's a good movie. That's a good movie.
I got another one that you know, I like older films. Wonderful Life is It's a Wonderful Life is another one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, some older films. Yeah, my favorite movie personally is Casablanca.
Okay.
But one of my favorite movies, which is actually a trilogy, which actually really it's my favorite books. Right.
Okay.
Is The Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Okay.
Right. A lot of people are looking at the division in the country, and they're looking at the election, and they're wondering, like, what do we do? Right. Like, what can I do? How do we even start? Right. So, if you've ever read, you've probably seen the movies.
Yeah, I've seen the movies. I actually started reading The Lord of the Rings. Matter of fact, let me, you know. So I bought this special memorial edition of it.
Wow.
I got like half. I mean, dude, listen, it's a very dry read at certain parts.
It is. It is. That's true. What I will say though is that it's so it was written by a man who was concocting this whole story throughout his experiences as a soldier in World War I, right? Which is one of the most horrific wars up till that point in history.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say that it even surpassed World War II, just because the method that they were killing people with the mustard gas and you know, the trench warfare and the disease that broke out. Yeah.
But so he experienced like all of the depravities and evil that mankind has to offer in a way, right?
Right.
And he was trying to form a story. He originally wrote The Hobbit as a children's story. That he wrote these in the form of letters that he sent back to his kids. So he was trying to form a narrative to explain all of this, right, to his kids. So it's interesting because it's a vast and sprawling epic that at times is super dry, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're not into the really, like he invented a language, right? Like
Yes.
Elven is a whole, like they
Well, he
invented.
was a linguist
He
by
was,
trade.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is a ton of you can get into it, but so because of that, it has a lot of lore. It was the basis of when Gary Gygax started Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the archetypes that he used. He even originally, I believe, called them a hobbit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when they first, he built that character into the mythology. But my whole point is that if you read the books through that lens, um, there's well, two scenes, but one in particular that I think contains a nugget of wisdom that is worth sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the particular post, let me see, where did I put it here? Um, the the quote is, let's see here. So the quote is from when Frodo and Gandalf are sitting,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, or actually, well, there's two quotes. There's one where he and Frodo are talking, and Frodo says, "I wish it need not have happened in my lifetime," and Gandalf says, "So do all who see such times, and it's not for them to decide. All
Mm-hmm.
we have to decide is what to do with the time we're given."
Mm-hmm.
And then later he says, "Saruman believes that only great power can keep evil in check," which is the strict father mentality. But he says that's not what I found. I found that it's the small everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay.
Mm-hmm.
Small acts of kindness and love.
Mm-hmm. Right. Pretty good.
So that's,
That,
you're
that,
you're in a church, right? So,
yeah.
and I'm not to tie this to the Bible, but I could. I mean, there's so many threads to tie this to any
Right.
religion that you want to, right? Like that simple lesson is where you start,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and I've said this before with, you know, it's very there's a lot of churches and pastors that have tied themselves intricately with the Republican Party,
Right.
and I'm not saying that uh, people in the church cannot be involved in politics. By no means, am I saying that. But
Well,
you
legally, they're
have
not
you have
supposed to and still
well,
get tax
no,
exemption.
well, you can take part of the local uh, political process because of the countries that you live in. I mean, especially when you have to pray for the powers that
Mm-hmm.
be. You have to respect the laws that in the country that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think that we as Christians we fall a lot short of is that we try to say God pick this person or whatever, and our understanding of God is so small and limited or whatever. Who are we to try to put and confine put God in a box to say
Right.
that I know he picked this person? you
Mm-hmm.
know Now God, yes, I believe that he ordained and
Mm.
allowed Trump to get into office. But whether you believe that he did that for, to show us our own dark underbelly
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, like we don't know. I mean,
Well, yeah. I mean, and here's the thing, right? It's, you can't know what God wants, right? Because God is, he someone at that level would not perceive time the same way that we do. So by
right.
giving us free will and allowing us to make choices, he could very well have just set into motion something he knew would happen. He by giving us free will, he set in motion the conditions that allowed Trump to come into
Right.
power.
Well, and
And
that's my point. That what you just mentioned is free will. from what I don't like a lot with what the right does is that they base their whole tent pole is on the issue of abortion.
Right.
Is and this, homophobic and transphobic. Now, listen, I've said repeatedly that I don't believe in any of those.
Hmm.
I don't support really gay marriage. I don't support abortion. Now, that's your right to do those things. I don't want to say that no one can do those things, but when it comes to a religious background, my Bible, the Bible that I study,
Hmm.
it opposes those, and you have to separate religion from secular.
Hmm.
And as I said before, I can go and get married in a church with a
Hmm.
priest or a pastor or whatever, and that's different than someone going to a justice of the peace and getting married. Now,
Hmm.
both from a legal standpoint have the same rights.
Right.
The state or the country will recognize that marriage, whether I go to a church and get married by a lay member or a
Hmm.
clergy member, or from a justice of the peace.
Right.
And that's where, to me, I've said before, if civil unions would have been when recognized,
Well,
someone got married,
I mean, the problem with that idea is, right, that if you recognize people's right to enter into a marriage like that with whomever they love, um, then it's a very small step. Um, it's okay because religious views are personal, right? Your church might not allow it, but someone else's church might.
well, the
And so
Episcopal
they
Church
could
does,
go to a
yes.
priest and get married in a church that's open to that.
And the Episcopal Church does. I
And
mean,
that's
they
the whole
allow
thing,
it.
right? I mean,
Right.
there are a lot of churches that still their church opposes that as a
Right.
policy, and they
Right.
don't have to do that, right? You don't
Right.
have to do a ceremony that you don't want to, right?
Right.
But they are allowed; they have the freedom to go do it if they want. It's like I
Right.
believe in choice, and the whole thing with freedom is that, like I think we've talked about before, the cost of freedom is that you have to be willing to tolerate people making choices you won't agree with.
Right. Well, right. Listen, the church doesn't have to allow heterosexual couples to get married in the
Right.
church. I
Yeah.
mean, just because someone who's heterosexual, they approach the pastor and say, "Hey, we want to get married." The pastor can say, like, "Well, you're a habitual cheater. You're, someone that doesn't even live by the tenets of Christianity. I'm not
Right.
performing the ceremony, or you're not members of this church." So,
Right.
right, that it doesn't have to be just discriminatory because someone is homosexual. Hey, you're not a member. I wouldn't expect you to be a member if you're homosexual and you're attending this church. And if you're living undercover, like that, hey, you can go join a church that, like you said, it
Right.
supports homosexuality.
Right.
They don't have a problem with it. But again, I don't understand how you eradicate those portions of the Bible
Hmm.
that that say this is what you shouldn't do. Now
Mm.
there's plenty of
The
other
problem with
religions
the
that you can
Bible and with any
practice.
religious text is that it's always open to interpretation, right?
Well, I mean,
I
it
mean,
says that man is not supposed to lay
so
with a man.
my well, it's the thing with the problem with the Bible, right? Is that, and not to theology. I once had a theology professor in college who gave us a challenge, and he told the class, pick any position on any topic, and I'll support it with quotes from the Bible.
uh,
And anybody, you pro-abortion, anti-abortion, pro-gay marriage, anti-gay marriage, anything, and he'd find a quote from the Bible that would support that.
uh,
And that's kind of the problem.
well,
Um,
you
a lot
okay?
of it forms around what you already believe, right? To me personally, and this is just my personal take, right? Because I grew up Catholic, I've read the Bible, I've read the Old Testament and the New Testament. The part that really stuck out to me, right? There's only one place in the whole Bible where the apostles actually went to Jesus and asked him, "What do we have to do to get into heaven?"
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 25. And that's where he says to them, "As you do for the least of thee, you
Mm-hmm.
do for me. He says, you know,
Right.
as the way you get into heaven is by, what you did for me, when you helped
Mm-hmm.
me, when you clothed me, when you gave me comfort. And then he said, but we've never seen you in need. We've never seen you that. And he says, as you did for those, the least of you, you do for me.
Right.
So small acts of kindness. As you do small acts of kindness for the least of thee, so you do for me.
I hear you. I'll just say this: the Bible is not supposed to be taken, and that's what a lot of people do. They take snippets or just individual scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
to support their positions, and you're not supposed to
Right.
do that. You're supposed
Right.
to take it as a whole, and the overwhelming majority of scriptures have scriptures that support them in other places or whatever. So if you're just taking, like, like the one where it says take an eye for an eye, and a lot
Right.
of people that grew up in church,
Mm-hmm.
and we both know an individual that always talks about Old Testament
Right.
God versus New Testament. But
Right.
right, on one portion you were living under the law, and then with the New Testament you're living under grace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it invalidates everything that went before then, but um, we basically were saved, and the middleman was taken out. The high priest was taken out. We all have access to God and salvation through
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can directly be saved or whatever, like you said, through what we do, but it can't be just based on one scripture. Like, I can't, like your
Mm-hmm.
professor said, hey, yeah, I'll support this with one passage or whatever. Like, well, yeah, but that passage might go against, what I'm doing might go
No, no.
against another one.
I think his point was to caution people that when you read the Bible, very often when people read something like that,
They take it one scripture at a time.
and they tend to form around the things that already agree with them or that already give confirmation bias.
Got
You
you.
know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's one of those things where he was actually, I think, in the point he was making is that the Bible and things like that, texts like that, are meant to have you go back to them
Okay.
over and over and reread them because you will get different lessons from them. You will see different passages that will
Well,
mean
right.
different things to
Yeah.
you.
Right. Yeah. I,
Um,
I agree. I agree with that. So
um,
yeah.
but
Let's
so
not
yeah, I
let's not
mean,
stay too long on theology or whatever.
yeah, I hear you, man. We go down rabbit holes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But listen, we're at a critical stage here, even though now we see that Biden has been declared the winner and he's the president elect.
mhm.
I do fear that President Trump is going to try to, gummy up the works and
Oh, he
everything.
will.
Right.
Yes.
He's not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah.
And we talked about this
He's the
last
first
episode.
president in our history. Yeah, he's facing actual criminal.
Yeah.
He's facing real consequences if he
Right.
loses.
Well, and the thing that I fear is his supporters that, again, they didn't get the outcome that they wanted, and the actions that they could be prompted to take to
Yes.
get an outcome that supports
Yes.
their guy.
So, listeners, this brings us to our second vocabulary word of the day. The first being the aestheticization of politics. The second vocabulary word is stochastic terrorism, which I will also put a link to. So, have we talked about this before?
No, not the terrorism.
Stochastic terrorism is an actual thing, right? The actual definition is the public demonization of a person or group resulting in the incitement of a violent act, which is
Okay.
statistically probable, but whose specifics cannot be predicted.
Oh wow.
So the quote is, the lone wolf attack was apparently influenced by the rhetoric of stochastic terrorism. Think
Okay.
of Rwanda,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened between the Hutu and the Tutsi. The
Right.
one group vilified the other to the point that it caused violence.
Right.
Charles Manson.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Manson's in prison for life, and he never killed anyone himself,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
All he did was talk other people into doing it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And that's the problem. To exactly your fear is that yeah, those people out there, if Trump finally does decide to actually tell people, I mean, that whole stand back, stand by,
Right. Oh yeah. Right.
right?
Well,
I mean,
they're standing by for something, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. And if he suddenly tells them, hey, I think the election's being stolen, go seize your local police station or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
then that's when shit hits the fan.
Right.
Pardon my language.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. But that's when we get back to that choice that we talked about earlier, people are going to have to make.
Yeah, again, if you say you love this country, if you say you love America, and I've gotten in discussions with individuals, they sometimes look at me, oh yeah, you're a Christian, you're former Marine,
Mm-hmm.
and
No, you know
why?
what? Wait a minute. What did you just say?
Yeah.
I seem to remember you chewing me out pretty well one night when we were working second shift together because I referred to you as a former Marine.
Listen,
And
listen.
you lectured me at length on how there's no such
I,
thing as a former Marine.
I've gotten a little older now. All right, let me put it this way. I'm a Marine veteran.
There we go. Okay.
And so, a lot of people look at me that, and they are taken aback that I vote more liberal than what they would think I should vote.
Expect. Right.
All
From you.
right. And
Yes.
so,
Right.
my thing, you're free to, your politics, that's a personal thing. But I'm not going to be defined just by those, I got those labels. I got my own personal experiences that led me to this point.
Right.
And that's what I hold on to. And I refuse to be demonized. I refuse to be pigeonholed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I voted for some Republican, candidates. I look at their policies. I mean, first thing I want to know, do you support unions? If you support unions and, a lot of other stuff, like I can get behind you depending on what
Mm-hmm.
other, areas you lean towards.
Right.
We've gotten away from a centrist politician a lot more, in the past, then now it's a lot more polarized. And I don't
Right.
understand it. If we want to
Well,
get things done, we need to be more willing to discuss what we can get accomplished on our common beliefs. And then, hey, I'll go look for somebody else to support me on this issue.
right. Yeah. I mean, there's no easy answer to any of it. Um, the you know, it's like moving a large ship, right? Like there's a lot of things we can do, but even if we're all doing it together, it's a slow move,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, I watched, to the point actually, I was getting to with the Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
um, that the lesson was small acts of kindness are the thing that keeps the darkness at bay.
Right.
The real hero of the story is not Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
The real hero of the story
It's
is
Sam.
Samwise,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because, and I don't know, I mean, it's, Samwise was thrust into it, right?
Right.
He
Yep.
was literally pulled out of hiding by Gandalf
Yep.
and thrust into the adventure. And his whole contribution was to help someone else carry their burden.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's profound. So,
So, to tie two pieces of pop culture together, just last night I watched a movie with my kids. We introduced them to Groundhog Day.
okay.
Have,
Wow.
have you seen it?
Well, yeah.
Okay. So it was, especially in 2020, right? It's an interesting movie
Mhm.
because, you remember, I don't know how long it's been. You remember how he gets out of it?
Well, yeah. He literally helped everyone with their things, but he had moved beyond the point of doing it for his own selfish interests. He wasn't even thinking about, like, yeah, I'm gonna get the woman, I'm gonna spend all this
Right.
money, I'm gonna just have fun or whatever. I'm just gonna do all this stuff because it's the right thing to do. And like, right, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and repeat the same thing. And he didn't.
Well, and it's a profound lesson in he shifted his focus. From the beginning of
Mhm.
the movie, his focus is strictly on himself and how anything else affects him. He doesn't like any of the other people around him,
Right.
which is, if you look at it from the lens of what's going on in America today with all the people
Right.
around them who don't like the other people around them,
Right.
um, he shifts his focus by focusing on their stories.
Yep. Yeah.
He learns everybody's story in the whole town,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It was interesting. My kids were asking while we were watching the movie, how long was he there?
Well, I
Like,
mean,
how
right. You got
long do you think he was actually repeating that same
oh,
day?
you got to imagine that it probably was a good year, at least. At
At
least.
least a
At least,
year.
right. I mean, you think about everything that he had to like, to learn the piano. I
Right.
mean, like, like, right. And I can only do it one day at a time. Like, right. I take a lesson and then I have to come back,
Yep.
like to get from where he started to where he ended up.
Yep.
Yes, that's a long time.
Right.
The language that, to memorize these, these books or what, like, so yeah, he was there for a long time. Now it's funny because you broke that movie down and a lot of people wouldn't even look that down and get that theme that you just mentioned. They had I guess a newer Groundhog Day called what, Spring Break,
Did they? What?
or is it what's the guy's name, from Brooklyn 99, what's his name?
Oh, Adam Sandberg?
Yeah, yeah. So he had one that was in the same vein as
Okay.
Groundhog Day. Uh
Okay.
but you're right. The moral of the story was not as strong as Groundhog Day.
Right.
It fell flat. I mean, especially like, what it could have been. I mean, yes, he did have some growth, but it wasn't to the extent of what, you saw in Groundhog Day. Um and another show that I think did a good job with making yourself not as the key or the center of the
Hmm.
story, The Happy Place or The
I
Good
haven't seen
Place.
that yet. The Good
Yeah, The Good
Place.
Place. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Oh, you
I've
haven't
heard
seen it?
very good things about that, but I haven't
Listen,
watched it yet.
bro. It took me by surprise, and I won't give it away the twist or
Okay.
whatever.
Right.
I cried at the end of the series finale to that, man.
Okay.
I mean, it did. I mean, it's one of those things where you see the evolution of this character, Hellstrop, or whatever,
Hmm.
and like basically she was the same way, where she was a selfish person. It was all about herself, and then by the end of the series, she's falling in love. She cares about the other people in her group or whatever, and it did it ended. I mean, it was a show that probably could have ran a good 2-3 more years easily,
Right.
but they said they had a defined beginning and end, and I mean,
Hmm.
I thought the ending was very poignant,
Right.
so you
I
should.
actually really like it when a show will end it for the sake of a good story
Oh,
rather than
dude,
try to milk
it
it.
listen it was a very good show, so
Yeah.
I highly recommend it.
All right, I'm gonna have to definitely check that out.
Yeah.
All right, man, we're over an hour, so I think we
All
gotta.
right, man.
But this was good. This was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do this again soon. We'll keep you viewers updated on what's happening with the election and state of America.
Yes, sir.
I happen to know we have at least one international viewer.
Really?
From a friend of mine, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
Well,
yeah.
it was funny because just to wrap it up, you had put on Facebook how you couldn't post advertising for our
Yeah, they
show.
wouldn't let me post an ad for our last show because they claimed it might influence the election.
Hey, man, that's a lot of power that we have.
I know. I'm actually flattered. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah.
Facebook. Yeah, for thinking that we have that much reach and influence.
But you know what? Post a link to this episode on that thread, man, and
Okay.
let some of the other people that were asking about it
Okay.
see it.
All right, I will.
All right,
All
man.
right, man. Have a
Take
good
care.
day. I'll talk to you later.
Yep, this is
All right.
Intellicide signing off.
Peace.
Later.